Welcome to Pros from the Underground, coming to you from my basement in northern Michigan, where I read, write, think, and say things, and quite often I get to talk with someone. Well, it's June 2024, which means many of us up here in northern Michigan are at the Interlochen Writers Retreat. And so today I'm talking with Joanne Grabinski, a beloved member of that community. And for me, she represents a whole lot of people who have come into a writing genre from some other walk of life, from a highly successful career or careers elsewhere. As you'll see, Joanne had a long career in academia, specifically gerontology, where she's an important voice. And then she went off to develop a great skill set in fiber arts. She's also hailed and celebrated in that field. And now she comes into memoir, developing a great set of skills, so look out for her. She has some interesting things to say about migrating from other genres, other walks of life into writing, specifically literary forms. So if you're coming from some other walk of life, some other planet, some other dimension, she has some helpful things to say. Here's Joanne. Here we are with Joanne Grabinski. I'm thrilled that she's here. Of course, we've had long discussions elsewhere. Primarily, we convened at Interlochen at the Writers Retreat over the years, and now I have her on Pros from the Underground. I have a few questions for her. I'm just going to start right off. I think it's fair to call Joanne a polymath, that someone who's highly skilled in various walks of life, different fields, different efforts, different genres. And here she comes into writing, and specifically she's working on memoir, which we'll talk about here in a moment. But early on in her professional life, she was a voice to be heard when it comes to gerontology. So I'm wondering, you have an important book in gerontology studies, and I'm wondering, okay, so you are a scholar, writer, compiler of information for people early on. How does that set of impulses or skills travel with you into more recent work in art and or in writing?
Okay. I've thought a lot about that. And I think that I can easily say that I brought with me from that previous world almost 30 years of in academia and family studies and gerontology. What I brought with me has been more a set of skills than bringing the knowledge base with me, although indirectly the knowledge base comes with me in terms of, for example, as I knew that I was going to be stepping away from my academic career, I said I have to listen to what I've been preaching all these years, and that is think about, plan for, and start doing what comes next before that you take that step over the end point. And so I very carefully spent a lot of time thinking in that last year as I was teaching and winding down administrative and roles in that. I thought about where am I going next? And I made the decision that I wanted to see if I could take my fiber work to the level of being recognized as an artist. And I wanted to take my writing that had been academic writing, research writing, could I take that into the world of creative writing? And those were my two goals as I stepped over that end point. So then what have I brought with me from that world? I think that the last almost 20 years of that academic career, I was on the road working for 3 different colleges or universities, 2 in Michigan, 1 in Connecticut. So my office was the trunk of my car, and there was a limited amount that I could take with me in that. And I had to be prepared to be 100 miles, 300, 400, 500 miles away from home without anything left in my office. And so I think some of the things that I brought with me are being ready to make do with whatever I'm confronted with at the moment. So those are some of the ability to improvise. Again, that making do with what I've got at the moment.
That's great. I'm thinking of there's a famous guitar player, musician, Jack White, who's talked about the dangers of getting comfortable as an artist. And so what he explained that he would actually make himself slightly uncomfortable while doing the work, even like a as a process of pushing something slightly further away from his body, so he had to reach for it. So his more of his being was caught up in doing the effort, making the things happen. That created an improvisational set of impulses for him. So that's really compelling for you to hear for me to hear. The other thing that strikes me that resonates personally with me as well, when you ask yourself, can I be recognized as an artist in this genre? And I think that's a deep question for so many of us. Um, can I simply get affirmation from other people who are good at this? Let's roll into art then. So you are known, you are recognized, no doubt about it, with various forms of award and affirmation and celebration as a fiber artist. So tell us about, just briefly tell us about the medium and the genre, and of course we'll show folks what that is. And I'm really interested too, because this is Prose from the Underground, how you see the relationship between your artistic medium and your writerly efforts. I'm sure you've thought about that.
Yeah, yeah, I have. My medium as an artist is I'm a fiber artist, and I work with the materials, the threads, the gridded canvas, the equipment, the all of those things, the tools of needlepoint. But however, I call myself an improvisational fiber artist because of the way that I work. And that is that I just take a blank piece of canvas, tack it onto stretcher bars, and put it on my stitching stand. I pull some threads that are a color of interest to me that will work on that size of needlepoint canvas. And then I thread a needle, and at some point, I just stab the needle into the canvas and start working. I almost never know where I'm heading with a piece, what it's going to be. I have no idea what the design is. I would have looked at a lot of stitch patterns. I would have looked at a lot of photographs of artworks, not in this medium, but in other mediums. I'm really intrigued by. I also do non-representational, so abstract without meaning for most of my pieces, just the shapes and the lines and the squares and circles and that. And in that combination, eventually the design emerges and evolves as I stitch, and I just get lost in a good way. Then moving into my writing, in my art, I stitch with thread. In my writing world, I stitch with words. And so in my writing world, I pay attention to individual words, and there I do think about, I start my writing with an intent. I know what story I want to try to tell in some way. But then it's the words, like in my artwork, where I'm paying attention and creating or using stitches that fit where I'm going. In my writing world, I struggle with finding the right words, the right sentences, the right phrases. And so I might write them over and over again. Whereas in my art world, I've already practiced a lot of those stitches over and over and over again, so they come more automatically. But I feel like they sometimes in my art world, I'm not as challenged as I am by my writing world.
So in in your artistic world, in fiber art, you can come to a blank canvas and stab the needle in and let things happen from there. In writing, and especially with memoir, there's a world of story that you're trying to render in some way. So you're automatically in a different space.
Yeah.
Is there any of the impulse to let things happen in your writing in the same way that it occurs in your artistic work?
Yes, there's definitely the impulse. I wish that would happen. And once in a while it does. I've recently, over the past couple of weeks, I've been trying to write in short form. I was intrigued by the people who were writing serially on Substack.
Sure.
And, and that then I'd never tried writing Flash. And so I've been trying that. And I sent off a Flash piece to two of our writing friends who we'll see next week at Interlochen,
Good.
and who were delightful and kind enough to give me some feedback and said, yes, this is working. They knew the bigger story from which memoir piece from which I was working and really struggling to get it on the page. And what I found with Flash, or this shorter form, is that I wrote down phrases just on a blank piece of paper, just wrote down phrases that were coming to my mind, and not trying to evaluate them, not trying to write full sentences or full paragraphs with it, just wrote those down. Then went back and put them each one on an index card, and then shuffled the index cards, and then set that in front of me, and then wrote from that, and let that be the limit of what I wrote.
I don't want to push this too hard, but it seems worth mentioning that you said in your fiber art, you know thread patterns, you know patterns that you can just apply, and that those patterns take you somewhere. I wonder if we need to insist on this when it comes to prose, that there are patterns, patterns of expression or utterances. If you're a literary critic, there are things that we can acquire and get good at those types of scenes, perhaps. And then there's less consternation when we're in the middle of something. We know just sort of at some deeper level what will come next.
Yeah, there are, from my previous professional world, there are frameworks,
Yep.
theoretical frameworks that I've looked at, and not for quite a while now, but it reminds me, takes me back as we're talking about this, that could some of those frameworks fit. I think of taking my first year at Writers Retreat, the workshop with Anne Marie Oman, and she used the five senses as a framework for writing. And those kinds of things I've begun to think about again. So whether I took a year ago this summer, I took about a 3 or 4 hour workshop with Des Cooper, and she used the journalism, the who, where, why, what, how, when, that I knew from my high school days in journalism and being on the school newspaper. And using that was an interesting framework. And so I'm wondering if either going back to those five senses or those journalism questions, whether those will be worthwhile frameworks for me to build story around.
Yeah.
Again, something that I bring from my past world is the concept of a genogram, which is a form of a family tree, but it doesn't go the full extent of the family tree. It only looks at who are the key people.
Yeah.
And so as I have been working on a whole bunch of different memoir pieces and looking at some in my family, and I found that by doing a genogram of only the key people involved in that particular story, and so I was looking at generations 3 to 4 generations of a family and who's in and who's out
Mm.
of that, who's not there and why aren't they there, has been an interesting pull that kind of takes me away from the story I thought I was telling about why is that person not there. And in some cases, that person is me who's not there, because the decisions and choices and activities and actions and behaviors are happening with all those other people. But I'm physically there, I'm not there.
Okay. Last question. All we're dancing on top of this now anyway, but so you're in memoir, you've written lots of pieces of memoir, you're working to stitch them together. I have kind of a weird question for you. Again, going back to this notion that I think you can easily be called a polymath, someone who is highly skilled in various disciplines or fields. So I ask you what impulses from your earlier work in gerontology and art come into play in your memoir efforts. Um, do any of those things that you did well in as a scholar or as a fiber artist work against you in your efforts memoir? Do you ever
Yeah.
feel that?
Yeah. I wish they didn't, but they certainly, yeah, they do. One of that is the over research. I think one of the major projects I'm working on is a memoir in cakes, the cakes of my life, most of which I didn't make. Some were made for me, others, made for others, but significant in some way. And I find myself, the internet is wonderful, but it also is a rabbit hole. And I just find myself diving down that rabbit hole and the history of cakes and those kinds of things. And so I'm writing and I'm writing and I'm writing, and I finally find that I'm writing an academic piece on cakes. I'm not writing the memoir of the cake that has been significant to me. So that's one of the major things is over researching, taking too many notes, feeling like I have to get all that in.
And what do you do about that?
Well, in one case, I just cut it all up and put it through the shredder because I knew that I'd gone too far. And after I did that, and I still had the research saved in a separate file, but I again took that paper and pen and I wrote down what I thought were the key ideas that needed to come back into form that. And the memoir piece that I was writing about that particular cake,
Okay.
and which was a German chocolate cake,
Oh,
and and the and as I was making that list, I forced myself. I put cake information on one side and people information on the other side, and I forced myself that for everything I wrote about cake information, I required that I write 3 people things.
great. You got to balance out your cake and your people.
Yeah.
You're reminding me of something that I haven't thought about in a while, but and I've only seen part of it, but there's a really important documentary about The Shining, the movie, the horror movie, The Shining. And apparently Kubrick researched the living heck out of the entire region surrounding that hotel and all like the whole history, and knew like famously knew like every single possible thing a human of modern times could know about the region. And of course, most of it doesn't come into the film itself. But the documentarian was explaining that this helped uh, everyone involved at the writing and filming level, to have some sort of deep understanding of the earth they were standing on and filming in, and the mythology that had informed the area, the people, the culture. You're making me think that maybe putting your head or falling far down into a rabbit hole or rat hole, perhaps, here on the internet, is is not all bad if you can emerge and see like, okay, I've gone too far. Now I have to pull back and do something like what you suggested is I have to bring the people back in to the cake world.
And I found myself again with another one of the cake stories that all of the family members involved in it are no longer living. In both in the generation ahead of me, there's nobody remaining living, and on that side of the family. And in my generation, I'm one of two or three that I know of who are still living. But the ones who are still living are not the ones who would know anything about that particular cake story or the setting for that. And so that's where then I began to turn to, okay, what do I know about that time frame? What do I know about that community? What do I know about that house that cake was baked in? And I think that I tended in my previous world, I tended to do a lot of either drawing pictures of what I wanted to say. Sometimes that was the stick people, sometimes it was some kind of a timeline that I was doing. But that really helps me again to sketch out whether it's, and without sketching perfection. This house doesn't have to be in the exact spot compared to that road or that town or whatever, but just doing something either symbolically or in my very non-ability to draw decently, but still drawing something. And that's something that I brought from my previous professional world, is that in working with students, I would have them draw those pictures. And in my doctoral work, a couple of the courses where then I drew literally a blueprint of the house and the rooms and who could go in those rooms and who couldn't. So that's another tool that I'm trying to bring into my writing. Yeah, I have, and in terms of art piece that has meaning to it, I have done a couple of things that that is representational. And one of the pieces, I think I sent you an image of it, is a story about the end of my husband's life and me moving forward. And I did it strictly on the canvas. And that really was interesting to me. And I was amazed at how, again, that was essentially short form. It's maybe 7, 8, 9 inches wide and maybe 5 inches, 4.5, 5 inches high. That in that constricted a space, I could tell a whole story.
Yeah.
And with the beginning and with moving beyond the one side of that. So that also intrigues me about, and I think will inform me. I haven't tried to write in words that story, and I don't think I want to, but I want to take the lesson from that to try to see what happens, either blending the writing and the art or one informing the other.
Much more to discuss and think about. I don't know why I haven't had an artist yet on Prose from the Underground, but you're the first. I hope you'll come back, and I will see you at Interlochen, as will many others. Thanks for being on Prose from the Underground.
Thank you, John. This has been fun.